Hi, my name is Fran Turner, and my story begins in 1982. I owned a beauty salon, and I was a surgical technician at the hospital in my town. I met a man, and I dropped everything, moved to Colorado, married him, and things went good for a few months. And then I left and came back home. When he came after me, I hid out for 3 months. And then after Mother got threats and my sister got threats and I was continually being threatened, I decided to do something that I can't even believe I did. But I hired someone to kill him. In 1982, I was convicted of capital murder. The judge sentenced me to spend the rest of my natural life in TDC. They transported me, and I walked in those gates and I looked around and saw all these women, and I didn't know what to do. They were screaming slurs at me. I was real tiny, 5 feet tall and about 98 pounds. And I was there for several months and just fell apart. So they took me over to Valley, which is a unit for mentally ill. I stayed there for several months and was on Thorazine, Sinequan, and finally one day the doctor said he wanted to send me back to Mountain View because I had this sentence to do and he didn't want me to be doing it on drugs. I went back to Mountain View and they put me in the kitchen, and it was a really hard job. I couldn't handle it, but I had to. And finally, after another year or two, I fell apart again and went back to Valley. It was there that I decided one night that I just couldn't live anymore. I couldn't work, couldn't handle the job, I couldn't handle these drugs they had me on. So I sat down on my floor, my back to the aisle, and broke down a little razor. I took the blade, and I remember hearing it plunk on the floor when it came out, and I was terrified. I didn't know how to cut my wrist, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I put an army blanket under my cot. I pulled it out from the wall, and I was going to wait for the lights to go off and slit my wrist and hang it off the side of the bed by the wall, so if any blood came out, it would be on that blanket. They wouldn't see me. But before the lights went out, this little girl came up to the foot of my bed, and she started beating on my foot. She said, "Would you go with me tomorrow to see Mike Barber? He's a football player, and he's told me I had to bring somebody. And I don't know anybody, Miss Fran." And so I didn't even know how she knew my name. I told her no, to get away from my bed, and I didn't want to hear about God, just to not come back, to leave me alone. And it wasn't 5 minutes later she came back and started beating on my foot again. She was pretty drugged up, and so was I, so she told me again, "I can't go back tomorrow without somebody. Please go with me." And again I told her, this time I said, "Get the hell away from my bed." And I screamed real loud at her. And so she left. But you know what? She came back as soon as the lights went out, and she beat on my foot again and said, "Please, please go with me." And I did. The next morning, I pulled my wet, nasty clothes out of the corner. I'd worked in the kitchen all day. I put them on. My hair was matted. I couldn't get a comb through it. And I went with her to the program. And Mike was speaking. He had big tears in his eyes, and he was this big man. And I thought I was really humiliated when I first saw him because I was scared to death of men. But I saw him cry. He was talking about how God had put his life back together, how he'd given up football and wanted to just come in the prisons and witness to inmates. And it just blew me away. I thought, why in the heck would anybody want to come in and be around a bunch of convicts? But something happened that day, and I felt this warmth come up inside of me. I always say it felt like a big lighter coming on, and this heat was coming up inside of my body. And I wanted to live again for the first time. I had hope. And so Mike led me through the sinner's prayer, and they left. I went back to Mountain View then and began my time, and I was there for 26 years. I thought I would get out because I prayed every year to please God let me go home. It didn't happen. He had another plan for me. Mike never forgot me. He and his family stayed in touch. They wrote letters. They came in to see me. Let me say that I began college. I had this urge to get a degree. I didn't get one when I was young. And after I graduated from Central Texas College, a miracle happened. I got a scholarship to go to Minnesota Graduate School of Theology. And I worked 2 jobs, worked for the Officers Beauty Salon, 12 hours a day. I came home every day and studied, and by the time I got out, I had accomplished 2 doctorates. I got a doctorate in philosophy and a doctorate in theology, and I'm probably the only offender to ever do that. I'd gotten my last set off, and that was it. You know, I said, I don't even want to come back up for parole. They had to bring me up because it was a law, but I kept getting these 3-year set-offs, so, you know, I don't know what happened. I was laying in my bed one night. The warden didn't know it. Nobody knew it. And they got a phone call at the unit. Said that I was going home in the morning. An officer came in at midnight and she said, Turner, pack your stuff. You're going home in the morning. And I felt like somebody had just poured a bucket of ice water over my head. I just scrambled. I didn't know what to do. I said, well, I hadn't made a phone call. I don't know who's going to come get me. And she said, well, I don't either. All I know is you're going over to reception. They're going to release you in the morning. Do you know what? Mike Barber and his family were waiting at that gate for me. They wanted me to come stay with them and be a part of the ministry. Well, I got out and I wanted to be with my kids, so I went home to the ranch, and I was a cowhand for 3 years. I ripped the cuffs off of my shoulders and I broke my knee, and so after a while I decided, well, I better move to Fort Worth. Mike found me a place. I just picked up and left. I was on a bus going to Fort Worth, and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know anybody in Fort Worth. I just got a ticket. It's crazy. And I called Mike on the bus. I said, Mike, I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't stay at the ranch anymore. It's killing me. He said, you just stay right there. I was on a bus. I couldn't go anywhere. And so he made a call to Brian and Simber Sanders. And you know what? She was waiting at the bus station in Fort Worth for me. And they took me into their home, and they made me a part of their family. And it wasn't but several months later, we were at the convention center, the Kenneth Copeland Convention Center. And it just seemed like the devil was just trying to take everything away from me. It had been like that since I got saved. But the fight just went on, you know. I'd write the ministry, they'd write me back, they'd come and see me, and I had all this strength, and then it would go away because I was having such a hard time. Well, I was sitting in there watching Jesse Duplantis, and all of a sudden, my lights went out. I was sitting next to Bibi, and I looked over at him. I said, Bibi, get me out of here, and that was the last words I could say. He went to pick me up, and my whole left side was dead. I had a stroke. And I mean, I was completely dead on the left side down. I was in another realm. I don't know anything. He kind of drugged me up the aisle and laid me down on the floor. I remember looking up, and people were coming down, laying hands on me in the middle of Jesse Duplantis' sermon. And I opened my eyes, and I looked around, and they were praying over me, and I felt tingling. The tingling started in this side of my body, and I get chills right now because all of the feeling came back in the left side of my body. The stroke was gone. The emergency came and took me to the emergency room, and they took a CAT scan. Sure enough, there was a place in my brain where the clot was about that big around, and they couldn't believe that I was fully functional again. And I walked out of there in 4 days. Mike always had me over for Thanksgiving, Christmas. I spent all my holidays with the Barbers and the Sanders. And then after 3 years, I wanted to come back home and be with my children. And I did. My ex-husband, the children's daddy, gave me this home to live in. And so this is where I am today. I'm just retired. I've written my book, my life story, and I'm really excited about it. I'm hoping it'll be on the bestseller list someday. My goal is to put it in the prisons because the name of it is Choices. And that's what our life is all about, our choices. Choices got me where I was. Choices brought me out. And today I'm just a very happy 73-year-old woman. I was 38 when I went in, 65 when I got out. A quarter of a century went by and I was still in prison. But I made the best of it and God just delivered me. My prayer today is that my friends that are still in there doing the same sentence I was doing will one day get out. It's been 30 years and they're still there. And I just pray for a miracle for them. I go back in all the time with the ministry and I give hope. That's about all I can give is hope. But my testimony seems to be working because the women write to me and they tell me, oh, Miss Fran, you made it and so can I. And so thank God for Mike Barber Ministry. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't make it out here when they get out, because you can. I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing. And Mike and them stepped in, and there's always somebody that will step in and help you. All you've got to do is reach out for help. It's everywhere. People don't want to see us go down and go back. Nobody wants that. You don't have to be hopeless. You don't have to feel helpless. There's a church in Houston called Elevate. B.B. Barber would love for you to give him a call. Before Mike led me to the Lord in the early 80s, I didn't even have a life. Looking back, I didn't have a life. And then after I came to know the Lord, things got so good and they just gradually grew and grew and grew. And today it's like He just lives inside of me. I don't want to do anything bad anymore. I don't want to even think bad thoughts anymore. I didn't have to do anything. He's done it for me. And life is wonderful. I can't imagine it any other way. My name is Fran Turner, and my life has been restored, and I just want the world to know it didn't just happen for me. It can happen for anybody.